Trying to pin you down for this for ages. Been top of the list. Jeff Bullock.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Making me famous.
So you are an ACMG IFMGA guide.
ACMG trained, and the ACMG is a member. The association is a member of the IFMGA, the International Federation of Mountain Guides Associations.
Right, okay.
Um,
So the ACMG is like the Canadian specific one, and then the IFMGA is where all the kind of individual countries come together.
yeah. So that's the governing body of the mountain guides associations around the world.
And
yeah.
ACMG, Association of Canadian Mountain Guides.
Yeah.
And then the IFMGA is just International Federation
of Mountain Guides Associations. And it's got three titles actually, because it's right here. So the IVBV, I actually don't know what that means. And then the UIAGM, which is the French wording for this.
Yeah.
I think this might be Austrian actually.
I mean, actually, I'm going to quickly just pin this here if that's okay.
Sure. Yeah, whatever works better.
They love their acronyms.
Yeah, and they're complicated. Like I think the people who started the associations.
Yeah, you were saying it's actually quite hard for people now to get to be a full mountain guide in Canada, or is it just less people wanting to do it? Do you think?
Well, I think it's always been hard in Canada. Canada has grown to be a standard setter in avalanche forecasting for sure, like the Canadian Avalanche Association, which was in many ways it was born out of the heli ski industry, which started in Canada. Like the first heli skiing happened in Canada in the mid-60s in the Bugaboos. It was Austrian mountain guides who started it, Hans Moser and Leo Grillmeyer. And, when they started this idea of, it was heli-assisted ski touring, and it turned into full-on heli skiing. They realized pretty quickly that they needed to understand the snowpack more. So, out of all of that was born the Canadian Avalanche Association, and it was a global leader. It still is a global leader for training and forecasting tools for avalanches. So, it's sort of one of Canada's greatest contributions to the mountain community, I think.
Was it the first country to have an association? Maybe not, because I guess Austria and that probably.
No, it wasn't. Like the professional mountain guiding as a career, I mean, it started a long time ago. Like in countries like Switzerland and France, there was people who guided people on the mountains, and I think typically they were often just farmers. People who lived up in these mountain villages, and they would just sort of through word of mouth take people into the mountains, and they had knowledge about the routes, to get up high on the glaciers or get to the glaciers, that sort of thing, and it just sort of evolved that way. The first mountain guides in Canada came to Canada in the late 1800s after a fatality on Mount Lefroy and Lake Louise. The Canadian government basically suggested that they wanted to ban mountaineering entirely. So it was the CP Rail and the Chateau, in a way. It's obviously evolved to new ownership over the years and stuff, but the railway ran the hotel, and they saw just a big opportunity. So they suggested bringing Swiss mountain guides to Canada at that time, and it was like the Foyts family, Edward Foyts Sr. and Rudolf Amer. The Amer couloir on the north face of Mount Temple is named after him. And there was a few of them that were brought over to guide people in the Canadian Rockies. And they made dozens of first ascents, like dozens and dozens of first ascents with people. And then it sort of evolved from there, but the association wasn't formed until the mid-60s. And it was these Austrian guides that started it. And it was purposeful, but it was a bit of a fluke too. And same with heli skiing. I mean, it was born in Canada, but it wasn't. I don't think they had the idea of, let's just use a helicopter to run laps. They got a bump, did some ski touring, and it just became obvious that that's the way to do it. And it evolved from there. So, and then the avalanche forecasting in Canada, to modern day, it's Canada's been a leader in instruction and delivering professional level courses and public courses too, and getting basically the world up to speed with different techniques. And we have a very diverse snowpack structure throughout Western Canada with the different mountain ranges. And I think that plays into it as well. It's complex, and we have the avalanche control teams on the highways and stuff. So there's a lot of demand for it. And then more industrial work, with mining and stuff. So the Canadian Avalanche Association is involved with all of that. And that's a prerequisite for the mountain guiding program. So, when I did my training, there was operations level 1 and an operations level 2 course, and with some prerequisites for that. And I couldn't complete my full level guides courses, ski guide and alpine guide, without my operations level 2. So that in itself is an accomplishment in many ways. I mean, it takes a number of years. We learn how to forecast avalanches and move in avalanche terrain safely, basically. Yeah.
And how did you get into guiding in the beginning? Because I know you kind of moved around.
Yeah, for me it was a bit of a fluke. I mean, I have always been drawn to the mountains. I grew up close to the Rockies in central Alberta. And I think it was this curiosity, really, kind of looking up at the mountains and wondering, like, what's up there? What's around the next corner? What's over the next ridge? So as as a kid and a young man, I was really curious about the mountains. And my grandparents lived in Penticton, BC, in the Okanagan. And we would make trips there every year, a couple times a year. And we'd drive through Rogers Pass, and I'd look up at the north wall of Mount McDonald. And for me, I don't know what it was, but it was just this curiosity. I was looking at this wall and had this urge to climb it. So when I graduated high school, I actually went to college to study social work, child and youth care work and social work. And I realized pretty quickly that wasn't going to work out for me. And then I ended up in Banff for a semester. I was taking a semester off, and I stayed for 15 years in Banff. And then discovering the guiding industry was a total fluke. I had no idea. I didn't even know what a transceiver was. I didn't know anything about avalanche gear. Did a little bit of rock climbing when I was 18. Really adventurous exploration with strangers, really, like people I just met, wandering around the mountains. And then it was actually one day, I don't know who this person was, but he gave me shit for being in the Sunshine Village backcountry without avalanche gear. And I was hitchhiking back to Banff. And me and my buddy Eric, Eric, we were just on Twin Cairns, like just outside of the resort there. And this guy was like, well, where's your backpack? Where's your avalanche transceiver? And I was like, what are you talking about? I have no idea what you're talking about. So he sort of scolded us. And from there, I did some research. And obviously this is pre-internet. So it was, asking around and phoning around. I took my first 2 avalanche courses with Yamnuska. My AST1, AST2, and they used to be called Rack 1, Rack 2. And I just discovered things there. The guides who ran those courses were mountain guides, and got to talk with them. And then I got involved with the Alpine Club of Canada, and I started as a junior volunteer leader, and just sort of snowballed. And I found myself really loving not only being in the mountains, but taking the responsibility, leading people. And eventually got ready for the training and exams through the ACMG.
And how is to go from like nothing to a full mountain guide? What is the time, the money, the process of like, yeah, you do this and then that, and then this qualification?
So you have to build.
Maybe not. You don't want to speak about money, but if a rough idea.
I think I spent about. I got some grants, and this is going back. Like I've been done my courses now for I think 16 or 17 years. I think I spent about $35,000.
And how, if you don't mind me asking, how long ago was that? Like
in the mid to late, like through the 2000s, I was taking my training and exams.
So would that be more expensive now?
Yeah, it is. It is. There's more prerequisites, and just inflation, I mean, that plays into everything. We know that. But yeah, it's more costly. There's some of the prerequisites that you need to get through your operations Avalanche courses. There's more now. I've taken some of those afterwards, just as CPD training. But back when I did it, I think it was about $35,000, and I did it over 6.5 years. But you have to create, it's a little bit different than a traditional trade in the sense that you have to create a resume to get accepted into the program. Once you're in the program, you start taking the training and you get your apprentice level courses, and you can start working with supervision, which is much like any trade. And then you get ready for your full level courses, and then you do those.
And what are the courses to get to the full mountain guide?
For a full mountain guide, outside of the Avalanche training that I talked about, it's an apprentice rock guide, and then you can move directly into apprentice alpine, and then full alpine from there, and then apprentice ski and full ski. There is a full rock guide cert as well, but it's sort of an outlier. There's not a lot of work there, and that was sort of my thought process too. It seemed like it maybe wasn't worth the energy to take that course, that full level rock course, because there's an apprentice rock guide an apprentice alpine guide and an alpine guide. You can do everything a full rock guide can do, like in regards to scope of practice and stuff. And it's a true adventure in itself, like the guide training. I mean, you're hanging around with a lot of young people that are, they're not misfits, but they maybe didn't fit in.
They're not 9 to 5.
They're not 9 to 5. They're not traditional. They maybe didn't fit in college or university. Some people got a degree and then moved into guiding, or vice versa. But a lot of people were sort of like myself, right? They're maybe a little bit in limbo, and they discover this career, this sort of unique career.
I feel like Banff's still like that now. The people that I know in town, like they are. You do get, I'm probably the most 9 to 5 person I know, because obviously I work in the office, but I think most people come at Banff, they don't. When I first came here, I thought it was quite weird how people did seasonal work, but did it long term. I always thought of a kind of gap year thing to do. Whereas, I've obviously been here 5 years now, and to me, it's more normal. People in their early 30s to just kind of go from season. They might have the same seasonal jobs. Like someone might be a ski patroller and then a VFR guide, or like a driver and then something in the winter. But I definitely think this area it attracts people who aren't living the 9 to 5 typically.
Yeah,
the 9 to 5 here is weird. If you in the city, if you're not doing the 9 to 5, you're kind of the odd one out. Whereas here, it's the opposite.
It's the opposite. Yeah, exactly. And then working through weekends and stuff. It's the total norm in towns like Banff and Canmore and Revelstoke, these tourism towns. And I think that's a little bit of freedom too. That's what I felt.
Yeah.
And I still feel it, right? It's kind of like I'm not the 9 to 5, Monday to Friday mindset. I can build a schedule sometimes it's a pain in the ass, sometimes it's great. But build a schedule a little bit around adventure and your own needs in many ways. But yeah, Banff's like that for sure. Yeah.
So what was the first job that you, quote unquote, real job that you got within that industry?
It was cat skiing in the interior down by Nelson, BC. I did a couple of shifts with a cat ski operation, White Grizzly cat skiing, as a tail guide. And that was truly my first real experience in a commercial operation, where it was, it was really set up, really well organized. I had been volunteer leading with the Alpine Club, but it's a little bit different. You're a volunteer, but you're also you're sort of designing everything yourself. You're suggesting the trips and organizing the group. Where when I walked into an operation like that for the first time, guides meeting is at 6:30 to 7:30 a.m. And the structure is very set in stone, and breakfast with the guests, and then get the skis ready. It's very regimented in that sense. And that was amazing. Getting paid to ski, I was just in the back of the group picking up the pieces, but, I knew right away, I was like, I want to do this for sure. and then just sort of grew from there,
Yeah. You're similar to my sister where like she does something totally different, but she is one of these people that sounds like you're the same where she did something and she just knew that that's what she wanted to do. She just immediately, like hers was theater, like drama and theater, and that's what she's gone on to do. And I've always been very envious of people. I mean, of her, but like of people that you meet who just, they have a similar thing where they did this thing and they just knew it,
Yeah. Yeah, it was a little bit of a calling, you could say.
Did you feel like your parents like push you in a certain way? No, but they were like kind of hands off, or?
No, my parents were, they raised us in central Alberta, basically on the edge of the foothills, and we would go into the mountains with them, but they truly didn't understand or know about this industry, adventure tourism.
But they weren't like, when you were at school, they weren't like, you have to go to university, you have to do this.
Yeah, they're a little bit like that. Yeah. They're like, you got to choose a path. And, my dad was like, if you don't want to go to university, get a trade. Yeah. He's totally right. It's like, you might as well be working on something towards a ticket, as opposed to just maybe doing odd jobs and not working towards a bigger goal. So I actually started my electrical apprenticeship.
Okay.
Like right out of high school.
Did you enjoy it at all? Or were you just like this?
Some of the work I enjoyed. Like, I went where I was living at the time in Medicine Hat. I finished high school in Medicine Hat, and I got some work in the oil patch, which is, it's Alberta.
Yeah.
But building new infrastructure, so like compressor stations. So you're kind of you're bending pipe and running pipe, like conduit for cable and stuff, and it was actually pretty interesting. But I lost interest after going to school. Like I got my second year electrician level done, and I was, at SAIT in Calgary, and I was just basically gazing out the window at the mountains. And I went to college. I started college and did
the social.
And did one semester, and I was just like, okay, this is not working out for me. So I ended up in Banff, and that's when my parents got quite concerned. 2-3 years of me in Banff, and Banff's a fun town, and you'd party, and but I climbed all the time. I skied all the time, but my parents didn't understand it. So, they were concerned for sure at times. And then there was some near misses. Like I had some close calls in the mountains as a young man. Mm-hmm. And as you do, you go wandering around, you don't know what you're doing, and you're trying to climb up steep faces and stuff. You're going to have near misses for sure. You're going to see stuff happen. And the one day trip in particular, an acquaintance of mine, I worked at Minode Sports for a year. He would come into Minode's. His name was Gerard. He's from Australia. I was early 20s. He was early 30s. And we started chatting about a fairly serious route on Mount Delta Form above Moraine Lake. And, I was just game. I'm like, let's do it. I'd never done anything like that before. And we thought it would be a 12-hour a day car to car. And I had basically a sandwich, a bag of nuts, sort of a tattered sweater, little Gore-Tex jacket. That was it. Ice tools, crampons, a few ice screws, some rock climbing gear. And it took us 3 days.
3 days?
3 days.
How long did you... So you thought it was going to be like a day max?
Yeah, I thought it was going to be like... I was thinking 12 hours car to car,
Wow.
Say 6-8 hours to the summit, 4 or 6 hours back off this thing and around back to the car. Just totally clueless.
How did you know? So after day one, were you in any position to call for a rescue?
No, we had nothing.
This is
it would have been 1998, probably 97, around that time. Yeah, it was.
Like flip. This is like even maybe like the flip phone era. Is that even before then? Maybe.
Yeah.
It's pretty basic.
I didn't have a phone.
Right,
cell phone.
Right, yeah.
But
so what did you do?
So I would have been 26, I guess. We spent 2 nights out on the mountain with no equipment. Like we didn't have a stove, we didn't have sleeping bags, we didn't have any shelter.
So why did it take you so long?
Because it's very technical. Right, it's very loose. It was October 5th, and the days were short. And we're really lucky that a storm didn't roll through, because we probably would have died for sure. Just exposure up on that mountain. We had no shelter. So the first night, or the end of the first day, I actually took a lead fall. There was a piton. I tested the piton. I lightly weighted it. I was going to take a little rest and continue climbing. We're in some rock climbing in some cliff up there. And when I sat on the piton blew out. So I took this fall, and it was pretty big. It was probably about 15 meters. And I fell past Gerard, like past the anchor.
Oh, God.
And I wasn't injured. And I ran back up to Gerard, and I was like, let me at it. And, I was just foaming at the mouth to try it again. And he was like, we should probably hunker down, because basically the lights are going out. It was getting dark. He was like, we should probably stop and think about waiting out the night. And I had never bivvied before, bivouacked.
But you obviously didn't have any bivvy and stuff.
We didn't have anything.
You're literally just lying on a ledge?
We were on a 70-degree ice slope. We chopped out a little ledge like this.
And just
anchored ourselves, and we pulled our backpacks up to our, as far as you could, and just shivered all night. Just sat next to each other.
I assume you just didn't sleep.
Didn't sleep.
Or like
hallucinated quite a bit. I remember, thinking there was a full water bottle in front of me, because we were dehydrated, hungry, all those things that happen. I'm trying to reach this water bottle, but it was a beautiful night. I mean, it's one of these experiences that I wouldn't want to redo, but it was semi-spiritual. I don't want to say it was totally spiritual, because it was unintended in so many ways and dangerous. If it would have snowed or rained on us, we would have been so screwed. We didn't consider going back down. We could have descended the couloir. We could have just built V-threads and wrapped down, but I don't recall even considering it. So we shivered all night, and the next morning, Gerard did the first lead, which was the crux of the route. And by 9 a.m.-ish, we heard a helicopter coming up. And there was quite a bit of cloud around us, just sort of fog. And they flew up to me first once they could get to us, and they held up a sign. And it was Gord Irwin from the Banff Public Safety Team, and another warden named Jan. And I sort of knew them from living in Banff, and they held up a sign, wave your arms if you want to be rescued, or thumbs up if you're good. So I was like, we're good. We're going to be on the summit in an hour, right? No, and Gerard, I couldn't see Gerard. He was kind of through this little overhang, and apparently he did the same thing. They flew up to him, and he was like, we're good. So they split, and we're on this, it's October 6th now, and the day was nice. It wasn't bad weather. We hit the summit, but it took us a long time. It took us probably, it's a long time ago now, but I bet you it took us 8 hours to get from the top of the couloir to the summit. It's only 400 or 500 meters, probably not a lot of climbing. And then there's a notch. We get on the summit, and there's this really exposed notch. We had to rappel in, climb out the other side. Made our way down the ridge, lots of rappelling, a lot more than we had anticipated. Ended up having the lights go out again. So we actually found a place to lay down. Like, there were some ledges, so we actually were able to lay down. And Gerard had a small bag of chocolate-covered espresso beans, and that's all we had. No water, no real food. We'd, eat one of those every hour, basically, just suck on it. And we literally hugged each other all night. We just laid on the ropes and spooned, shivered, slept a little bit. And then the next morning, so this is day 3, we rappelled down the rest of the route, and there's a really large flat area between Delta Form and Neptuak, another peak, and the helicopter flew back up to us and landed in this flat area. Same 2 guys, it was Gord and Jan, and they were like, they shut the machine off, and they're like, we're not coming back a third time, so you might as well just get in. And of course, we were pretty haggard at this point, so we fly back to Lake Louise. And we had no comms, right? Like, we hadn't talked to anyone. Like, we didn't have a radio. There's no cell phones back then, and nothing. So I get back to Banff, and my parents are in Banff. My sister's in Banff. My mom's losing her mind. My girlfriend at the time had called the wardens, which was the right thing to do for sure. We were overdue. She was losing her mind. Everyone thought we were dead. Frank the Tank and my other buddy Jeff were actually hiking up the trail. They were starting to climb up to us, up and over Neptuak with some supplies. And so that was, one of those moments in my life where it was, you kind of ask yourself, how ridiculous was that?
Mm.
Do I ever want to be in that position again? And, for the most part, you say no, but there's a piece of you that's sort of like the adventure was really thrilling. And just kind of kept going.
Yeah, remember you talk about another incident that happens, and you were saying after you kind of were chatting to your mum, and you were like, oh, I don't know if I should keep doing this, because of what happened. And then she was the one that you said you should keep doing it.
Yeah.
What do you think made her change from being like, what's he doing, to then you asking her if you should keep doing it, and her being the one to say, yeah, you should keep going?
I think by that point, that was 2003.
So this is like a lot later down the
This
line.
is about 4 or 5 years later.
Okay. So it's a lot more time, a lot more like...
Yeah. And I was basically almost a full apprentice guide. Like I had done some guide courses and exams and stuff and was working guiding by that point. And she just said, you've worked so hard to get to this point. You should just keep going, is what she said. Which is interesting because I just heard an interview from buddy there from the Foo Fighters, Dave Grohl, and he was talking about when he was young and he left LA to go start playing with Nirvana, sort of a big risk, and he wasn't sure what to do or how to do it. And he said the same thing. He said, I was talking to my mom. My mom said, go for it. So I think, if you listen to your mother, you should be okay.
Yeah.
Generally speaking.
Yeah. I think, my mom definitely sways between that, but then also like wanting me to be like safe and comfortable,
Yeah.
So that's why I think it's really interesting that your mom was kind of like, because what you do, obviously, as you've alluded to numerous times today, is actually incredibly safe statistically. But, people think of it as being this risky thing to do, so it's just interesting that she was just like, knowing that, she was like, yeah, still do it.
Yeah. It is interesting because that was a perfect opportunity for her to say, maybe it's time to try something else. And I probably would have, at that point in my life, I would have been like, okay, after the experiences I had that year.
Yeah.
But she didn't. I've never asked her exactly why.
She probably just saw that I would assume it's just she saw you enjoyed it.
Yeah.
She'd rather you be happy than you be, well, not rather that you were safe, but she'd rather you be happy. Like my mom and dad were the same. Like when I left school, they were very much like school, university, career, and I didn't go down that path. Similar, you actually did a trade, finished it, and then did something else really. I did a project coordinating for construction really briefly, and then obviously came out here and been working for Alpine and Adventure since. But yeah, they're now very much like encouraging of that. Whereas before they were the kind of more traditional, like, you just get a job. But I think they just, as parents, you probably speak to it more than I can, where you just want to know that your kids aren't total, fuck ups really. And then once you realize that, you're like, cool. Because then you're seeing that they're like an adult and they can live their life. And then you're like, right, cool, support what they're doing.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think parents generally just want their kids to be happy and safe.
Would you want your kids to do what you've done?
Well, I do have an idea for Chloe, and she's the one who's brought it up.
Mm-hmm.
Like, she's talked about architecture. She doesn't totally understand what that means, but she still talks about it. It's been a couple of years.
I talked about it as well when I was a kid.
Yeah.
I asked my art teacher, and I had no I don't even know. I think I'd seen it and thought I think I saw like a UK TV show about some house that got built, and I was like, oh, architecture, but no concept of it.
Yeah. I think it would be a great career for her. So we'll keep pushing that lightly. And then Kai, I don't know, pro soccer player.
Yeah, Ronaldo in the making.
Ronaldo, Jr., Senior, Bullock.
So what did you, so you did the cat skiing job, and then where did you go? What's your kind of like career progression within it?
After that, I did a very little bit of work for CMH. And then I started working for Yamnuska as an apprentice rock guide, an apprentice ski guide. And then I started heli skiing with Last Frontier heli skiing full time through the winter. And then I started, I think it was 2005, but before that, around 2004, I had some sort of one-off private guiding gigs, and that was sort of the birth of AAA.
Yeah.
In 2005, I was had a few people that were calling me to take them into the mountains, and some of those people I still climb with, which is pretty amazing. Like Lola's one of them. And that's where the company was sort of born. I didn't name the company. It was just sole proprietor for the first 4 years. 4 years. 2009, I named it.
And so that name Alpine Air Adventures, where did that come from? Or how did you think of it?
I had 36 different names, and in the end I was pick the one that is top of the list in the phone book. The yellow pages. It was before I understood Google, and Google was still sort of new, late 2000s.
It's not the madness that Google Ads is now.
Yeah, totally. So
the money pit.
That was sort of my theory, right? Just organic. I was thinking organic discovery of the business. AAA, it's going to be top of the list, and it is in some directories still. Would I change the name? Well, I've thought about it. But I don't think it's bad. I mean, you can just say AAA Guides. I mean, it sounds like a reputable business. AAA Plumbing, AAA.
Yeah, true. AAA Hockey. Is that not
AAA Hockey, AAA Towing. There's all good brands.
And how did you? So you've kind of worked through a variety of stuff there. I assume that over the course of that time, you saw stuff that you're like, that was really good, that was not good, and then you've just tried to amalgamate that all into your own company, AAA.
What do you mean?
You work for Yamnuska, and they do something that you're like, that's actually really good. I'm going to do that when I do it, and vice versa. They might do stuff that you're like, nah, that doesn't make sense, or I don't like that. Or I guess, especially in this industry, you see people make mistakes.
Yeah.
And you kind of learn from it. I mean, sometimes it's more severe mistakes, just because of the consequences of them. But
yeah, and AAA is, it's obviously a similar business to what Yamnuska runs, but it's for a guide, it's the easiest path to entrepreneurship, basically, in the guiding world, as opposed to trying to start a heli ski company, which would be almost virtually impossible nowadays, or something like that.
How long were you in heli skiing?
I heli skied for 7 years.
Right.
And then 5 of those years was full-time, full schedule. And
you say you're kind of conflicted between you enjoyed it, but now the industry doesn't necessarily sit well with you with regards to just the environment.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to argue that it's not awesome, because it is awesome. It's got higher inherent risks. I mean, you're flying around in a little helicopter in shitty weather, middle of winter, middle of nowhere, landing wherever sometimes, literally, you're like, oh.
Would you spot on the site? You're just like, let's go there.
There's a lot of that.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And especially up north there, some companies are very structured. Some of the CMH tenures are quite small, and they've got their money-making sort of days, right?
Yeah.
And they kind of have a flow to it if it works out that way. But up north, it was very exciting. I had lots of opportunities up there really quickly. But, Chloe was young, Kai was born, I was away 25 days a month through the winter. I'd do 13 or 14 weeks.
25 days a month?
Yeah.
Oh, through the winter, sorry.
Yeah, through the winter. It was just 4 months of the year.
Okay.
But basically I was gone, so, and there was that. And then there was some close calls with not only avalanches. I mean, that is something I was prepared for, but with the helicopter.
Yeah.
The helicopter, I was almost hit by the main rotor once, and it was total pilot error. Things like that happen, and you lose confidence pretty quick, and you start to ask yourself, is it worth it?
Yeah.
I'm dealing with avalanches on the ground. I'm dealing with a pilot that isn't awesome, dealing with shitty weather, dealing with shitty guests sometimes. You get back to the lodge and people are, especially I started in a management position with the operations, and, it was nonstop. You'd have dinner with the guests and they're just who's in group 1 tomorrow? It's just, they're relentless sometimes.
Yeah.
But there's some guides that make a full career out of heli skiing. Like they'll work as heli ski guides for 20 plus years. I guess they just have a little higher tolerance for that. But from an environmental perspective, and more, this annoys me a little bit about our industry because there's not a lot of talk about it. There's very little talk. Helicat Canada, which is an association that works with the mechanized operators, they do talk about it a bit, the environmental impacts. But when I started management, you'd start to discover how much fuel you're burning in a week. 8,000, 9,000 liters of fuel for 30 people to go skiing. It's pretty wild, actually. It's very wasteful and very thoughtless. You think about all the things going on in the world, and it just started to bother me. And I don't think I can do it again. I would like to, like I said earlier. It's fun to do.
You mean like you'd like to just go, but you wouldn't necessarily like to work?
Yeah, I just don't like that environmental impact.
Yeah.
I suppose if it wasn't like that, like say there was no negative impact on the environment, I would probably still do it, I guess. Yeah.
And even just in like that short period of time, you've mentioned like already like quite a few times that you said like close calls, and I think it is, you obviously know way better than I do, but from my brief stint in it, it does seem like one of those industries where that is the things that can go wrong just have a much more serious consequence than, like my previous job in engineering. If I scrapped something, i.e., a product that we were making and I somehow damaged it, like it might cost thousands of pounds, which was brutal, and your manager would be a total dick to you and let you know that. But it didn't kill anyone. Now, I'm not saying obviously that's the always the outcome in this industry, but like it definitely is like more, it's health, regardless of whether it's life and death. It's like health decisions, like you and your friend having that 3-day thing, the helicopter blade, like other things that have happened. Like how do you obviously seem like a very calm person, and the whole time I've known you, you've kind of just been mellow. You've never been too high or too low. Like is that something that you feel like you have to work on, or you just feel like you are just quite a naturally calm person and therefore you suit that environment? I guess what I'm saying, how do you manage those situations? Like how do you go from these close calls and not get freaked out and be like, I'm out of this?
It's something you learn a little bit. If you're willing to take on that challenge of leading people in an environment like that, or other, there's lots of work that's high risk out there, police officer, ER docs. You could name a bunch, but in the guiding world, you're leading a bunch of people that you most likely don't know very well. You don't actually understand their experience levels. So when things go wrong, I've always felt when you have a serious close call, or there's fatalities, I've been involved in that scenario before, it's almost like your brain hits that flight or fight instinct level, where maybe it's a little bit of adrenaline, but it almost brings you to another space, and it almost makes me more calm. Like maybe it's that hit of adrenaline.
Yeah.
And then afterwards,
you can't panic.
You can't panic.
It's almost, like your brain's just like, you've got no option here but to figure this out.
And it's hard to get into that mindset, but I have found with close calls, it puts me there. I think there's probably people that maybe work in emergency services regularly that deal with, incidents that are very real, that can probably summon that sort of mindset really easy, where it's just like, and they can deal with it. And maybe it's a little bit growing up with a firefighter for a father.
Yeah.
Like my dad worked as a firefighter for 25 years, and he came out of the military, and listening to some of those stories, maybe a little bit of influence there for sure. He was dealing with serious accidents and fires. That may have sort of groomed me a little bit, and maybe didn't even realize it. But that's an interesting question, and it's hard to know. And I think reflecting on your own personality, People have always said, Jeff, you seem really quite
Really.
calm. You're in my brain, most days, it's like chaos.
You're like a duck underwater.
Yeah. I'm
Or
like,
yeah.
and I think a lot of people are probably like that. You're processing a lot of things day to day, whatever that is, managing your own stress, managing other people's stress, maybe depending on where you're working. So, my personal view of me, how I think people perceive me some days is like, you're maybe super nervous or super out of your comfort zone. But I've heard that from people that, Jeff, you seem so mellow.
Yeah, I think
So calm.
like in a work environment, it's more like, if something, I remember the first couple of times when we were working together and I made a mistake from previous people that I worked for, say one of them was like a missed passengers that we were supposed to pick up on one of the transfers. And I remember like the first couple of times being like, oh my God, this is going to be the worst thing ever. And you were just like, I mean, you obviously were like, this is a mistake, learn from it, don't do it. But you also were just, it seemed like you just weren't that flustered by it, whereas, so I don't know if maybe your level of like what is actually like a stressful situation is just like a lot higher than the average person, a lot higher than the 9 to 5 guy who's worked in an office and, his stress is that something didn't get sent on time. Whereas you're kind of dealing with the more like, real stress of like being in a physical environment that's not ideal and you need to like make a scenario on the dime. You get a flat tire, you're like, cool, whatever.
Yeah.
I don't care.
Yeah,
I
think it's true.
Call the rescue people.
Yeah. I think that's true a little bit, like the environment that I've sort of cut my teeth in from a career perspective. I think that has shaped things a bit. And then from a business perspective, like I'm not a, as you know, I mean, I didn't study business.
Yeah.
I didn't leave high school going, I'm going into business. I'm going to run businesses. It was sort of hand in hand with becoming a mountain guide. It was the sense of freedom, sense of directing my own life in whatever direction I want, and I think what I've learned is to have someone like yourself work with me who obviously is super sincere and works hard. And when you see a mistake, it's even if it costs the business $1,000, instead of losing your shit and, maybe asking you to leave and starting fresh, you're probably better off long run. It's going to cost the business maybe a bad review and some cash, but you've gotten smarter. I've gotten smarter. We know how to manage things together better. And that's sort of the perspective I've taken with that.
Yeah, I definitely had two very different managers. Like the one that I did the engineering with was like that, like not like that. He was like, if anyone made a mistake, he was just a total, honestly, a total cunt to you. Like he would make your life hell for it. And then I worked in the construction company, even though I didn't enjoy the job. The guy who's my manager was the opposite of that, similar to you, were like, anyone, but obviously me, made a mistake, immediately he would always be like, don't stress, it's happened now. Like how did it happen? How have you fixed it? And how will you make sure it doesn't happen again? And the difference between those two guys as an employee was like the first guy, like obviously I never wanted to make a mistake, but if I made a mistake and it was the first guy who was an asshole, I dreaded telling him, and it didn't make me any better at my job, really, because I just really kind of hated this guy. So I just dreaded telling him that I made the mistake. Whereas the second guy, I dreaded telling him I'd made the mistake, but because he was such a good manager, I was like desperate to not do it again.
Right.
Whereas the first guy, it didn't matter if it was an honest mistake or you fucked up. He would have the same. Like,
he was just mad.
Yeah, he was just mad. Whereas the second guy, I would still have the same sense of dread, but I would be worse because I'd be like, I've let this guy down. And then after that, I was like, I can't do that again. Whereas the first guy, I was like, if I make a mistake, he's going to be a dick to me anyway. So
I think that's like with the second manager that you respected. I think that's just the level of respect.
Yeah.
Because he treated you well and you respected him. And I think that's, it's so important in every aspect of our lives. And I learned that as a young man from a friend of mine who's a year older than me. it was very simple. You just said, if you respect me, I'll respect you, very simple. It was one of those moments I was like, okay, what is respect? It's this and this and this, treat people well. And cause I've been around people who, when I was in the trades,
Yeah.
people that just lose their shit and you're just like, what is wrong with you? And maybe a lot of those people have underlying issues. Maybe it's, I don't know, maybe it's diagnosed issues. I don't know, or problems at home. But it didn't make any sense to me.
And you kind of get to practice that pretty much. I mean, I know you're guiding less, but you've kind of had the ability to like practice that with like customers all the time. You were saying today that 80% of the people that you go out with don't really want to learn the skills. They just want to do the objective, whether it's ice climbing or alpine climbing and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And you obviously go through like such a range of personalities and people. You've been, I assume you've been doing it for like 32 years now. Like you must have gone through every kind of customer and had to like, treat everyone with respect, and it must be difficult at times because people can just be total assholes.
Yeah.
For no reason.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've learned a ton from the people that I've guided and been involved with coordinating, guiding, just perspectives and different cultures. And, you learn, I mean, to be a mountain guide, you need to understand patience at a very high level.
Trust as well.
Trust. Yeah. Trust is huge.
Because the amount of times I've been out with you on like our introduction to rock climbing or ice climbing, and if I'm there, obviously I'll help you. But even me, like I don't do a ton of it. So, or like say I'm not there and it's a random guest who's just signed up. They've never done anything. And, I don't know, there might be the occasion when you're like, hey, I would quickly show you how to belay. Can you belay me? And you're just trusting this person that you pretty much met that morning to.
Yeah, it's weird that way. So you just have to be careful.
Yeah.
Yeah. Be thoughtful how you're doing things.
And I guess like you've done it so long that I imagine you are quite good at just pinpointing people who you're like, I'm not asking you to.
Yeah, there's a little bit of that for sure. Yeah. And being able to read the room very quickly. I mean, any job that requires you to work face to face with people on the volume of guiding, you'd be able to read people really, really quickly. There's a lot of work that requires that. But that's one thing that's my confidence in understanding someone in a very short amount of time is pretty amazing. Like I think it's something I've learned over many years now, but I feel like I can sit down with someone and listen to them talk for 10 minutes and I can probably predict what the next day or two is going to look like.
Yeah.
So,
and you must have also learned from people asking you, like, so you must get it, and you probably even could do it with me, where like, if I asked you certain questions, so say we're supposed to be doing Mount Athabasca, and I'm like a little bit nervous about it just because I've never done glacier travel. So, you must be able to like, from the questions that I'm asking, be like, right, cool, he must be a little bit nervous here. Or like doing that with like any guest. But like if they ask you specific questions, you can be like, right, okay, cool, this person's clearly got like, I think you were saying before how you were doing like a ski touring thing and you had these guys that just kept constantly asking you to do these kind of more risky objectives, and you're like, right, cool, these guys obviously want to like push it. I mean, that's maybe an easy one to kind of to guess because they're literally asking you kind of hit that thing. But I guess like from the questions that they ask you, you must be able to be like, right, cool, this person's like leans a certain way.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, you get a sense to who they are and what they're looking for. And it's, this work is managing expectations. Like sometimes you don't even realize you're doing it, but you're just doing it because it has to be done. Like people are, you get a wide variety of risk tolerances, right? You get nervous Nellies that maybe truly believe they're going to die today in the mountains, for whatever reason. Mm-hmm. And then you have people who are either, I'm going to say clueless sometimes. They just don't really understand the risks. And, not to generalize, but generally younger people and generally men, young
I mean,
men.
your story of the 3-day
Yeah,
adventures.
I mean, I was like that.
Yeah.
I just didn't know, but I had this thirst for adventure. But that's where, from a guide's perspective, you'd really have to manage those expectations and kind of rein people in a little bit and hope for the best. You always want to have success, whatever it is you're doing, whether it's instructional or an objective-driven day. Yeah, but it's exciting, and it's work that will never stop learning. That's for sure.
Because you're almost like, I was realizing today when we've been constantly chatting about the weather the last couple of days, and then, maybe an hour ago we were looking at it. Like, you must also be like a kind of like semi-professional weatherman from just constantly looking at the weather and trying to understand it.
Yeah, totally. And that's part of the CAA courses that I was talking about earlier. That's a big component to it is meteorology, like reading weather, different weather models and piecing it all together and building an avalanche forecast, basically. Yeah, and I mean, that's just another facet of this bigger picture work that we do. But it's exciting, and it can also be really tiring, I find, after most ski seasons. I'm really fatigued, and it's not the physical work of it. It's the mental work, and especially if there's a lot of, if you're dealing with a snowpack that is prone to avalanches throughout the season, you're just constantly thinking about it, and you're constantly changing objectives and making adjustments. But yeah, you become an amateur meteorologist for sure.
Yeah. But then also throw in the fact that you have 2 businesses, really. I know you've got other stuff, but like, you've got AAA and MPT. We've obviously been climbing today, and we're cooking food, and you're on your phone on the emails doing that as well. Like, it's kind of like a 24/7 cycle. Do you have like I mean, I know I kind of jokingly, when you go on holiday, I'm like, don't message me. And obviously you do, and I'm like, right, cool, I'm going to mess you back because it's, you're talking to me about work usually. But do you get moments or like something where you consciously, you're like, I'm not looking at my phone for the morning or the afternoon or a day or weekend, or is it you're just 24/7 on it?
Well, a little bit more and more, thanks to you, and the support that you give to the business, and Dom, and someone like Amanda coming on board for the summer. And that's pressure from my family too. More and more from the kids. They're like, well, why are you on your phone all the time? Because I don't want them to be on their phone all the time. And I just tell them it's business. I'm running businesses. I got to make sure everything's running smooth. But it's a lot of work for sure.
Is it hard a little bit because you are, at one point it was just you. Is it hard to at times let go of that and just be like, I'm just going to let it be?
Yeah. And I think that's a common thread with anyone running a business. I mean, that moment where you're like, this is the person that's going to deal with this for the next 2 days. I mean, it's really, really hard. I mean, it's as hard, if not harder, to make the decision to become an entrepreneur and leave a secure job. Like, I left the University of Calgary. I was running the mountain programs, and Amy was not entirely in favor of us buying MPT and building out the business more, and me leaving the university. And that stepping off moment was scary. And then of course COVID hit, right? But allowing or enabling people within the business to take control of things is scary too.
But do you feel like if you'd stayed at the university though, you would have regretted not doing?
Yeah, for sure.
Because my mum, so when my grandpa passed away, mum got, I don't know how much she got, but she got X amount of money, and she had like enough to either buy like an apartment and like rent it out, really, get in the property market, I guess, or start her own like clothing business. And she went for the latter one, so she started like clothing business. So she, designs like waistcoats, and it's really small scale. But this is like a decade ago, and it's still going. And then, but I think there was a period of time, as like a new business, and hers is nothing the size of AAA, but. Yeah, I think there was a point where it was not really doing anything. And she was just like, I can't believe she was chatting to me about it. And she was like, I can't believe I spent this money on this thing when I could have bought a flat and rented out and be making X amount a month. And I remember saying to her, I was like, the thing is, if you'd done that, you would be regretting never going for your dream, which was to have a small, a clothing company, And I know that she would have known that herself. I think it was just a moment of frustration where she was just venting it to me. But yeah, like you'd at least want to try it.
Yeah.
You'd rather like do, go with the passion project. And obviously this hasn't, but it fail and then be like, right, well, at least I tried it. And then I can go on to the more like safe thing to do, which is, I mean, you could probably always go back to the university if you really.
I could probably, if
something similar.
I was motivated to go talk to them and stuff. Yeah. I mean, running businesses is, and again, I'm not a trained business person. But I think the entrepreneur brain, mindset, personality is, some people are just born with it. Some people explore it and run with it.
Yeah.
Some people are born with it and maybe never explore it because it's that moment, and there's many factors that might discourage them, the loss of money, failure. I mean, those are the big things, right? Especially if you have a family. But I think to be able to just go for it, I mean, it's a very brave thing, courageous thing to do.
Yeah.
Because like with MPT, I basically spent all of our savings to buy that business at the time, and it turned around very quickly. Of course, COVID is another conversation. And then we know where it is today. I mean, everything has a lot of potential that we're doing. It's just navigating the business world. But I think there's a lot of people that think about running their own business, but don't make the leap and probably regret it in the long run.
Yeah.
Whether a little bit or a lot, I would guess. But
yeah, I think as well, like having worked with you, like I never appreciated the freedom of like watching you run it and the freedom that you've allowed me to do in the role as well. I came from two incredibly structured things, not that we're unstructured, but two not structured, that's not the right word, two incredibly
9-to-5ers.
Yeah, 9 to 5. Like the engineering job I had I actually worked for my dad, and it was the best and worst job I ever had because it was the best job because of how hard it was. It was like true working class. Like you clock in, you clock out. You got paid by the minute. Like it was like, yeah, it was kind of brutal to be honest. And the construction one I then went into was and that was a factory job. So I was on the shop floor making. I was like a grease monkey, constantly covering grease and oil and dirt and making these things. And then the next job was an office job, but again in construction, and again it was the same thing. Like you're supposed to be in the office at 8, but you got there early. You didn't leave it. You finished at 4, but you never left at 4. You got a 30-minute lunch break. I probably jokingly said to you at times as well, like I would so I drink a lot of water throughout the day, and sometimes I'd go to the toilet and then like 45 minutes I'd probably need to go again. But I was like, I can't go. I've just gone, and everyone in this office space has seen me, and
they're watching.
So it was just so like controlled, I guess, is maybe not as better a word to use than structured. And then working with you, and it's obviously we have a lot of good structure in place, but the freedom I see that you have and that you've allowed me to have in this role, like I know that I'm obviously thinking about it, but I'm like, you've ruined a 9-to-5 job for me. Like I don't think I could ever go back to that because of just how much I enjoy the freedom that I guess you have within your own business, and seeing you have that, I'm like, I couldn't go back to the corporate 9-to-5.
I think it's the only way. I mean, it's the way my brain works, right? I don't like being held down by anything. And I think in a place like Banff, I don't know. I mean, obviously there's businesses there that probably are very 9-to-5, but I think the people that go to Banff to live, I mean, they're going there for certain reasons, most of them. And it's lifestyle, active lifestyle, and a little bit of partying.
Yeah.
But, I think it's just, I don't know how I'd be able to run the business really any different when it comes to that sort of scheduling and just how we run our operations. And, listening to some other business leaders, and I do more and more, talking about 5-day work weeks and 4-day work weeks. There's one Canadian business leader that I listen to regularly, and Kevin O'Leary. He's a bit of a wild man, but he's obviously very successful, and I really like his no bullshit approach. But he's basically saying this 5 and 4-day work week is BS, because nowadays a lot of people are given a task, whatever that is, build this website. I don't care when you do it, but it needs to be done by this date. So make your own schedule, just get it done. It needs to be completed. And I think that's definitely like the mindset I come from, for sure.
Yeah.
And then working in the mountains, it's like that. If, you're in the mountains and you're not done till you're out of the mountains, and some days are shorter than others and some are longer than others. And there's not a set time, which I think is really healthy, for sure. I think it's good for the brain. A lot of people maybe have never experienced it and they just don't know that freedom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think when you were chatting about people like not want to take the risk of being like an entrepreneur or something like that, like, even in a smaller thing. So I've lived in Canada for 5 years now, but I moved to Australia when I was like 23 maybe. And I've got friends who like, they've been like, oh, I'd like love to move abroad or whatever. But I think now, early 30s now, it's harder for them to do it than it would be for me to do, say I'm just making something up, but another life change, say moving anywhere, right? Because I've had the past experience of doing it already, like even though it's a risk, I've kind of got that experience of like, right, well, I did it before and it worked out. So like, like you can do it again. Whereas I think the older you get, like taking those risks, like becoming an entrepreneur or whatever, like they're a lot more, it seems a lot more than when you're like a younger kid. And I guess you probably also, for some of my friends now have mortgages. They have, wives and kids. So it is more of a financial swap for them as well. But yeah, I think
it's scary.
Yeah. But it's also scary to think that, and I'm not talking about specific people I know, but it's also scary in general to think that people will never take that risk and will live that life. And obviously they have a family and kids, so they must be happy. But I'd be more scared of getting to the end of my life and be like, I never tried it.
Right. Yeah.
The fear of regret outweighs the fear of current failure, if that's the right way of putting it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I think I have more fear of being AA and being like, because I'm not a religious person, so, just keep it simple, like one life is how my mind works. And yeah, to get to the age of 80 and be like, oh, I didn't try that.
Didn't do what I wanted.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's not easy. But there's wild stories out there, like Colonel Saunders, KFC.
What's that?
It's like a chicken
No,
franchise.
I know, but what's the story?
But like he started his business, I think maybe in his 40s, but it failed, and it blossomed and failed. And, he was in his mid 60s when it really took off.
Yeah.
You read stuff like that. And even back then, where people didn't live as long, and, this guy's just like, that's it. This is all I have. There's no other way. And that's sort of how you have to think, when it comes to business and mountaineering. Sometimes, you might be in the middle of something and it's just like, there's no other way but to go up, and same with entrepreneurship. And it's just basically we're solving problems constantly. And that, I mean, every day, how many micro problems do we deal with?
Oh, God, yeah.
And some big ones, right? Thankfully it's been nothing serious, like, with the guiding company I'm not superstitious, but, and I think that's a big part of entrepreneurship. You're the captain and everything comes back to you.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if it's big or small, and you got to make those decisions, and you ask your team and involve your team. But I mean, that's a lot of work and it's a lot of stress and it's a lot of commitment, and it's scary. And I guess if you've never done it before, you don't know, but I think as an employee, you could get laid off.
Yeah.
And I think some people are turned to running a business if they get laid off. They're like, here's my opportunity.
Yeah.
Maybe get a severance and you got some cash to get something going or buy something.
I think it's also, for me, is you were talking about like being the person who's responsible for really everything. I mean, like that's kind of what you are for the businesses and I mean, you've got numerous employees, numerous assets as well with regards to vehicles and properties and stuff. Like, I've noticed sometimes where like I'll maybe say something like, we should just do this thing, and then you might have a different idea and I'll sit and be like, well, yeah, you're the person whose money is it's not coming out of your pocket, but I mean, like you have like the bigger picture idea with the money side of things, and it must be, it is a lot of responsibility because, you are like responsible for people really, like your employees and
that's something that I don't think a lot of people think about is it's almost like family and you're providing for them.
Yeah.
People are working for their income, but if for whatever reason things are mismanaged and you don't have that revenue to provide that income, it's a lot of responsibility. I don't know what we're going to hit this summer, but I think our biggest payroll last year was 26 people, I think, part-time guides and summer drivers and stuff. All of a sudden it's like, holy shit, we're feeding a lot of mouths here.
But do you also get like a sense of like being proud that you have built this thing where like you are like helping these people, I must like, or like,
no, that's a really good question.
Not maybe not the right word, but like you must have a moment where you're like, even just like, wow, like there's 26 people at that point in time. I know probably at that time you were like, fucking I've made 26 people, but you must have a moment where you're like, wow, like I've built this.
I don't think I've had an opportunity yet to feel proud in that sense. I know what you're saying.
Yeah.
And I hope someday that'll happen where I'm actually really proud, but it's almost like
you're not where you want to be yet, so you're just like...
Maybe that's it. Maybe I'm not quite satisfied, and I hope it's not a fundamental problem, and Amy thinks it is.
Yeah, no, you're just never content.
Like, yeah, which, I think that's just the nature of some people, but I just have some goals, and I would like to meet them soon, and I think maybe then that feeling of being proud, but there's not a lot of time, in a big picture in my life right now as a family, and obviously people running businesses all over the place have families, but I almost don't have time to think, wow, we're doing really cool stuff here. We're supporting lots of families, to the extent where I would say I'm proud of what we've built. I think it's getting very close where I will have the energy to actually think that way and but maybe I should be.
I mean, you definitely should be. Yeah. I mean, that was maybe my you should be. Yeah. I mean, that's kind of what I'm saying, I guess.
Yeah. Maybe it's time to be a little more proud. Yeah. I associate being overly proud with big ego.
Yeah, I was going to say that. Yeah.
Maybe. I don't know.
And I guess maybe proud's, well, yeah, I mean, proud is what I was meaning, but like more just like a moment of just like, that's cool, even.
Yeah.
You've built that. But I guess I've chatted about my uncle because I think him and I and you are kind of similar, where like, you always kind of want to do something, you're never really content, and him and I have chatted about it where like, he's like, I'm almost, and I agree with him, where he's like, I'm almost like jealous of people who are content with, and there's nothing wrong with this, but living whatever like kind of like traditional way of life you might think, whether that's like family, kids, grow up in the same town, live in the same town, have a one career job for your whole life, and that's a really good achievement. And, if people love that life, then who's to say, it's wrong. But yeah, he's just like, I constantly am just wanting to try new things, see new things and grow. And he was like, but the irony is that he'll never be content, really, So he's kind of like, yes, he's doing all these cool things and achieving these life goals, but he's not as content as the person who's not done half of that stuff.
Yeah.
And I guess you probably get it. I mean, that's my uncle personally, and me probably, but you get a lot of these high achievers in life. I mean, I don't know if Michael Jordan's the right example, but they're never happy. And you, like, average Joes like us look at them and be like, wow, what a life that must be. Whereas, they say like, if you were to live my life, you'd hate it because I'm never happy.
Yeah.
Always trying to get to And I guess it's maybe what you were kind of alluding to there with Amy, like just trying to be aware of that and not be that person.
And Amy's very content.
Yeah.
She's not a risk taker at all in really any respect. And I think that's partially why our relationship works. Because, it's sort of opposites attract.
Like a balance of the powers.
Balancing of the powers. But she's so content a lot of the time where I'm like pacing the house and she's just looking at me like, what the hell is wrong with you? Can't you just sit down?
This man in
and
my
I'm
house?
like, oh, think of this idea. And it's, I think it's something that I need to learn. And, it's a personality trait. I think there are people in my family that are like that, and there are people that are just very content. But I can see where my fundamental personality comes from. My one uncle, Colin, who's very A-type, and he's almost 80, and he just goes. He's not in the best shape, but he doesn't care. He's this little Irish man who's very successful. He's the mayor of Prince George for 12 years, and he's on boards here and boards there, and I definitely have snippets of his personality and I think it's trying to make the best of your time here, like what you were alluding to. We got 80 years, and you don't want to regret anything. So, but you also don't want to work your life away and look back and go, shit, I didn't have any time for my friends and family.
Yeah.
Which happens to a lot of people too.
Yeah, I definitely think I'm like that. Where like I'll almost, when I'm living it, I don't enjoy it. But then when I look back and I'm like, oh, that was amazing. And I'm better at doing it now, but I remember like when I like traveled for 6 months and then lived in Australia for a year. And I don't actually think I really enjoyed it when I was there. But now I'm like, oh, that was amazing. And I remember the last few months I definitely did enjoy, but I think that's because I knew I was leaving. So I was kind of like, it was that like, yeah, I guess it was just I was leaving. So it made me appreciate, if I had to move out of Banff, I guarantee I'd appreciate it way more in the last couple of weeks. Cause you're like, oh, I'm going to leave this place.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I'm like, I'm so obsessed with trying to, I don't know, maybe like, yeah, just, I don't actually know if I enjoy it in the moment. Like I look at people around town and they're just like, they're just fucking chilling and they look so content. But I feel like I'm constantly I need to do something to, I don't know. I feel like I'm looking for contentment, whereas people just have it, Yeah. Like, how do you do that?
It's a hard thing.
Yeah.
I think it's becoming harder and harder just with how competitive the world is.
Yeah.
Trying to make a living and trying to buy a home and this and that, everything that we're sort of expected to do in a first world country as middle class people.
Yeah.
We're sort of told what we should be doing and what it should look like often. And, we believe it. There's no reason not to believe some of it. But I think that adds to some of that stress where we're sort of trying to discover new things, new paths. Yeah.
Look, I appreciate you sitting down with me because I've been chasing you for months. And yeah, I honestly like working with you has been amazing. Being friends with you has been amazing. So I appreciate you finally agreeing to sit
down. Oh, this is perfect. Good timing.
I know. Thank you. But I actually have a question though. The Alpine Cup of Canada. I actually don't understand the concept of that.
Alpine Club?
Yeah. Because you were trying about it, whereas, I don't get it. I don't understand what it is.
Well, they own a lot of the huts. You know that, right? They own like 34 huts now, I think. It's a nonprofit. It was started in the early 1900s. When tourism was really starting to blossom in Canada. And there's A.O. Wheeler and Margaret, can't think of her name right now, but they started the club. They're like, we should have a mountaineering club. And it started with a camp, and the camp is still happening every summer, the GMC, the General Mountaineering Camp. So they actually started inviting people to go into remote places in the Rocky Mountains. And they'd use horse packers, and they'd pack in a camp and set up tents and go hiking and scrambling and climbing peaks. And that was sort of how the club was born, really. And then it's just evolved into this fairly big thing. I think there's about 15,000 members of the ACC now.
And is it, will someone, so say there's a club in Canmore and say it's got like 100 people, like, will one person just be like, hey, everyone, I'm going to do this thing, come if you want. And it's free.
Yeah.
Is that how it works?
Yeah, there's.
Right, I never understood.
So there's sections. So the national clubhouse is in Canmore, and that's the ACC clubhouse.
Yeah.
And that's the national office. So that's where the executive director is, and the president. That's where they work out of. And then there's sections. So there's the Rocky Mountain section, which is basically Banff Canmore. But you can be a member of the RMS living in Edmonton if you want. You just pay the RMS dues, and then you're on their list, and you can get invited to their functions and their climbs and stuff like that. Then there's the Calgary section, Edmonton section, Vancouver section, Winnipeg section, Saskatoon section, the Saskatchewan section. So there's all these different sections, and they organize amongst themselves internal trips and training, so that they like to get their leaders up to a certain standard. So when they do volunteer trips where their volunteer leaders lead people in the mountains, they have a certain level of expertise. And that's what we do when I work with the RMS. Usually it's often trip leaders that sign up for those, and they're getting supplemented, like the club will pay for part of their fee, like the cost of the course.
So I guess it's just kind of like a standard sports club, really. Like I went to,
it's kind of a sports club.
Yeah, because I think that's what I never grasped. I think I just always thought the ACC was like, because they own the huts though. That you just said.
Yeah, they own a bunch of huts.
So I think that's what maybe confused me over the time. Is like, I'm like, they own these huts, but then I didn't really grasp the concept of them just being like a club. I thought it was like a company. And that's where I was like, I didn't really. And then, I was chatting to a few people, and I was like, it just sounds like a sports club. Because I went to a running club when I was a kid, and, there was a coach, you had to be a coach to like take everyone. But effectively, it was just a bunch of people meeting and, going runs. And then we would do like weekends or trips away, up north somewhere, and they would rent a place, and then they would take the training and stuff like that. But anyway, I won't ask that because I've honestly never.
It's kind of what it is.
I've not grabbed that concept.
It's kind of a sports club. I've never thought of it like that, but that's basically what it is.
It's just that.
A mountain sports club. And it's big. Yeah. I mean, it's got deep pockets.
And I guess it's like, I guess the difference between it and like my example of a running one is like, the town I lived in had probably like 3 or 4 running clubs, and they were all different. Right. Whereas the ACC's the one that is just like a franchise almost throughout.
Yeah.
Throughout Canada.
That's kind of like that. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's good and bad. I mean, they do compete with us, our company. Like they offer more and more guided trips through the national section. I used to be way more involved with the ACC, but it got to a point where I just didn't really agree with the direction they were going. And we still do stuff for the RMS, but like I worked the GMC for 10 years in the summer. And maybe we get involved with them again, because we could support them more for sure.
Yes.
They often are looking for guides and stuff. Yeah.
Well, look, I appreciate it. Thanks for sitting down and just chatting shit with me for a bit.
Is that it? Cut?
Done.